Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well, and I think we can be honest with each other here. Saudi Arabia just didn't quite deliver to the expectation, especially considering the Saturday that we had. We had midfield drivers and top-end drivers completely jumbled up within the grid. Charles Leclerc starting 12th, Max Verstappen starting 15th. It felt like it was going to be a really exciting Sunday where we were going to see lots of overtaking and lots of battling on the streets of Saudi Arabia, and it just didn't quite deliver. In fact, I think it's the first time I've seen a safety car maybe ruin a Grand Prix, which was very weird to see. But let's delve into it in a little bit more detail. Here are my 3 winners and 3 losers from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. My first winners, and I feel like this might be a recurring theme over the course of the 2023 season, it has to be Red Bull Racing. They are just on a completely different league to everybody else right now in Formula 1. They are absolutely flying as a team. Let's talk about Sergio Perez first, because he picks up his 5th win in Formula 1, 4 since joining Red Bull Racing 3 years ago, and he just comes to life when it is a street circuit. Obviously, last year he picked up his first ever pole position in Saudi Arabia, and then he does it in back-to-back years as well. This time though, he was able to convert that pole position into a victory, and he just looked incredibly solid out front. It was a very dominant performance. We talked about Max Verstappen looking incredibly dominant in Bahrain. I feel like you can say pretty much the same thing about Sergio Perez. He just kept everybody at arm's length. Yes, he dropped behind Fernando Alonso to begin with, but the straight line speed advantage that Red Bull has is just incredible to see. And that straight line speed advantage certainly helped out Max Verstappen too. Starting in 15th place after a drive shaft issue in qualifying meant that he started way down the grid in comparison to where his pace really was on the Saturday. But he didn't go flying through the field like maybe we expected him to from 15th place. He struggled a little bit to begin with. Those first 4 or 5 laps, he was struggling for grip. He said himself after the Grand Prix that he was struggling in that traffic. Eventually, once he did find the pace in that Red Bull car, it kind of clicked into gear. He was able to start making those moves, and a safety car at just the right moment, just as he was finding that pace, did help him out as well. Jumped him up into 4th place, got the pack all back together again, and it was basically guaranteed that Red Bull were going to get a 1-2 finish at that point. Whether Max Verstappen was going to be able to win or Sergio Perez was going to be able to maintain was one of those questions, but Sergio Perez made sure that Max Verstappen was kept at arm's length. Max Verstappen did sneak the fastest lap at the end of the Grand Prix though to make sure he got that 1 extra point, and is still top of the Drivers' Championship. But at this point, Red Bull just looks so dominant. Should we just hand them the Constructors' Championship already? Possibly. My first losers from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix though, and I think it has to go to the stewards. Some of the stewarding during this Grand Prix was absolutely awful. The first big decision that they had to make around Fernando Alonso and his grid placement, I think they got that one correct. Fernando Alonso was too far to the left of his grid box. They gave him the 5-second penalty. They got that one correct. And then it just went downhill from there. The next big choice they had to make was again an Aston Martin car, but this time it was Lance Stroll coming to a stop on probably the safest part of the entire Grand Prix circuit. Supposedly Lance Stroll's car was still shown as on track, shout out Taron, and the FIA and the stewards therefore deemed it worthy of a safety car. But if they'd have looked at any TV coverage, they'd have known that Lance Stroll came to a stop in a very, very safe place, and the safety car was completely unnecessary. I've seen a few people saying that the FIA and the stewards wanted the safety car to come out to try and spice up the race. Well, it was at the absolute worst possible time because some people had already pitted, and if anything, it got rid of some of the battles that were starting to develop through that first stint. Then after the race, they decided to go for Aston Martin again. This time it was Fernando Alonso for not serving his 5-second penalty correctly, and the Aston Martin team working on the car whilst it had come to a stop. The rear jack and possibly the rear left mechanic in contact with the car, which counts as working on it to the FIA and the stewards apparently. Although how it takes the stewards an hour to come to this decision whilst Fernando Alonso is literally lifting the trophy during the podium ceremony is absolutely beyond me. Then to take it back after the fact anyway is just embarrassing. This poor guy that has definitely gone to Fernando Alonso after the podium ceremony, taken the trophy off of him, walked it all the way down the paddock, given it to George Russell. George Russell's taken a couple of photos with it, and then he's come back and said, actually, George, I'm just going to have that back. Walked all the way back down the paddock again and given it back to Fernando Alonso. I feel so sorry for that man. My second winner from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, and it has to be that man again, Fernando Alonso picks up a second podium in 2023 from 2 races. It wasn't a fluke in Bahrain. Aston Martin are certainly here to stay. Aston Martin just have so much pace through the corners. Okay, they don't have the top line speed of a Red Bull or a Ferrari, but I think when we get to some of those tracks where it is bendy, it is windy, and it's those medium speed corners that count, Aston Martin are looking really, really strong. Yes, Stroll was struck by reliability issues in that second stint, but Fernando Alonso just cruised around in third place. All right, he was nowhere near the Red Bulls again, but also he was able to elongate his lead when necessary. Right at the end there, Mercedes thought they might be able to get that place back from Fernando Alonso for a 5-second penalty, but he was able to elongate that lead beyond the 5 seconds. Obviously, then there was the controversy. They gave him the position, then they gave it back to him, as we talked about before, but Alonso was very happy overall with the weekend. He's very, very happy in that Aston Martin car, as I said, on all of the tyre compounds, and he's really confident now that they can hold on to second place in the Constructors' Championship, which is bonkers. The fact that they've been able to go from 7th to 2nd in the Constructors' Championship in just a season is incredible. Specifically, Fernando Alonso, though, that 100th podium was given to him, then taken away and then given back, but there will certainly be more over the course of this 2023 season. As I said at the beginning, Aston Martin seem like they are here to stay. It's not a fluke now. They have proper pace in that Aston Martin car. It's just about whether they can develop the car alongside the Mercedes and Ferrari guys, because as I said, second place in the constructor stand is up for grabs if they can continue that development race. They haven't been there before. We'll have to kind of see what they can do. But I'm really excited to see what Aston Martin can do and whether or not Fernando Alonso could maybe get another win in Formula One. And whilst we talk about second in the Constructors' Championship, let's talk about my second losers from this Grand Prix. It has to be Ferrari. They're 4th in the Constructors' Championship right now after this weekend, and they finished behind both Mercedes cars, both Red Bull cars, and the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso. Really a weekend to forget if you're a Ferrari fan. Charles Leclerc already taking engine penalties, dropping to 12th on the grid after a really solid qualifying, actually. Qualified in P2, and the pace in the Ferrari car was looking really, really good on a Saturday, and it feels like we're just repeating ourselves from last year, because when it came to the Sunday, everybody was optimistic. Lots of people in my chat were saying Ferrari guaranteed a podium position with either Carlos Sainz starting in 4th or even Charles Leclerc starting in 12th, and then it didn't materialize on the Sunday at all. In classic Ferrari fashion, it just didn't quite go to plan. The safety car came at the worst possible time for them, to be fair. Carlos Sainz had decided to pit early, and Charles Leclerc had literally pitted 1 lap before the safety car came out, so they lost out a massive chunk of time to the rest of the field that was starting to pit a little bit later than them. Once the Ferrari car was on the hard compound tyre, though, their pace was just absolutely nowhere in comparison to the rest of those top 4 teams. It was really strange to see some teams absolutely love the hard compound tyre and some teams hate it. Like Fernando Alonso loved his stint on the hard compound tyre in that Aston Martin car, but neither of the Ferraris could really get it to work, and the Ferrari team just absolutely hated their stint on the hard compound tyres. I think if anything, they were hoping for another safety car, and then maybe they could go back onto the mediums or possibly even some softs with Carlos Sainz and try something a little bit different. Culminating in a P6 for Carlos Sainz, a P7 for Charles Leclerc. Neither driver really happy with the pace of the car over the course of the weekend. Taking penalties already, lost out due to the safety car. They had disappointing race pace on the hard compound tyre. It just all fell apart for Ferrari over the course of the weekend. Fred Vasseur even came out afterwards and said it was unacceptable where Ferrari find themselves right now. It's starting to crumble, and we're only 2 races into the Formula One season. Ferrari need to get something back together again if they're going to challenge for second place in the Constructors. My third winners, however, had a great Saudi Arabian weekend, picking up a double points finish. I've gone for Alpine. In P8, they had Esteban Ocon. In P9, they had Pierre Gasly. And I think Alpine have found themselves clearly the 5th fastest package in Formula One right now. Esteban Ocon in particular absolutely loves the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix. We've only been there 3 times, but he's put on special performances every single time we have been there. He was really, really consistent over the course of this Grand Prix, especially considering he had a really tough Bahrain. Bounced back from that though, managed to get a P8, 4 points on the board for him. A double points finish for Pierre Gasly in Bahrain and Saudi Arabia also puts him on 4 points though, and it's going to be margins between those two, isn't it? They're going to be really close to one another throughout the Drivers' Championship this season, and I think it's going to be the tiniest thing that maybe pushes Pierre Gasly or Esteban Ocon to be that driver who is just marginally ahead of the other one in that Alpine car. Overall though, I'm really happy for Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly and Alpine as they find themselves comfortably that kind of top midfield car this season. My third and final losers though from this Grand Prix are the team I thought would be battling with Alpine, but seemingly not in 2023. It has to be McLaren Formula One. It was another one of those races where everything that could go wrong did go wrong for McLaren. A little collision at the start between Oscar Piastri and Esteban Ocon. Ocon came out unscathed. Oscar Piastri took damage to his McLaren, and in the debris also managed to damage Lando Norris's car. So within the first couple of laps, both McLaren cars already damaged and having to come into the pits very, very early. Lando Norris decided to pit again in and around the safety car because he wasn't happy with the pace that the McLaren had on those set of tyres. Both McLarens running around right at the back, never really posing a threat to anybody at all over the course of the Grand Prix. a little battle between the two of them and Logan Sargent at the end. Obviously, Oscar Piastri given the go-ahead, and I thought that was an interesting dynamic. The fact that they said, Oscar, you can go in front of Lando Norris, have a go at Logan Sargent. Lando Norris not very happy about it after the Grand Prix. He talked about the fact that he thought he would have been able to get at Logan Sargent had he not given Oscar Piastri the opportunity to have a go at him. Lando Norris already cuts a very frustrated figure in that McLaren car. He was very abrupt with all of his interviews after the Grand Prix as well. He just does not seem happy at all with what's going on at McLaren, and you can't really blame him after an incredible couple of seasons he's had in 2021 and 2022. McLaren just really aren't delivering him the package that he wants right now. Even saying after the Grand Prix that he wasn't very happy, but it was the best that he could do today. We were very unlucky. We just weren't quick enough. A few honourable mentions before we round out this winners and losers. George Russell could have definitely been a winner. He got the best out of that Mercedes package, considering Mercedes are really downbeat right now and not very happy with the package they brought to 2023. The fact that he nearly picked up a podium is very impressive from George Russell. Easily could have been a winner also. Kevin Magnussen picking up his first point of the season and Haas's first point of the season, moving them up in the Constructors' Championship. It's going to be fine margins right at the bottom there of that Constructors' Championship, and the fact they've got a point on the board is going to sit them really good for the rest of the season. Obviously, Nico Hülkenberg looking better in qualifying, but Kevin Magnussen picking up that point. Going to be interesting to see how that Haas develops. And on that kind of vein, Yuki Tsunoda could have easily been a loser from this Grand Prix, losing out on that point to Kevin Magnussen right at the end of the Grand Prix. Did really well to defend from him, but just couldn't quite keep that Haas behind right at the end. And I think Williams could have been a loser from this weekend as well. Considering their pace last year, that's maybe a positive, the fact that I'm saying they're a loser already. But Albon DNFing and then Logan Sargent just not being able to quite get it together in qualifying, and then seemingly falling backwards in the race as well. Not the best of weekends for Williams. Overall, it was probably the least entertaining Saudi Arabian Grand Prix that we've seen in Formula 1, but it still did add a little bit to those storylines that are starting to develop throughout this 2023 season. I'd love to know your thoughts though. Let me know your winners and losers in the comments down below. Whilst you're down there, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and I'll see you next time.